Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Cloud Zendo. Sensei Amie, good to see you again. You're kind of bookending our winter practice period before and after. And as we enter this kind of quiet month in February, where we'll get to see you in just about 3 weeks. I know the residents and some of the local Sangha are working on the precepts and getting ready for Jukai. So your talk tonight on the life of the Buddha will be most appreciated. Thank you so much for joining, and good to see you again. You have such a wonderful bio, and I just to say that you've been practicing for over 40 years and have received transmission from Sensei, our dear friend Sensei Kathy Fisher, and we're really looking forward to you being in our midst.
Thank you. As am I. And so good evening.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. We'll start with the verse before the Dharma talk.
Of course.
I forget it half the time.
Chance to hear it, study it, and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning. The Dharma is vast and subtle. We now have a chance to hear it, study it, and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning. The study it and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning.
So good evening, everyone. Such a deep pleasure to be here again with you tonight. Really an inexpressible pleasure to be practicing with you again, joined warm heart to warm heart, entwined with this worldwide Mahasangha, as well as all of you sitting together in the Zendo. And this time to have the power on and be able to see each other. So you can also see that I had a small surgery maybe on my face, nothing to worry about, but a much larger bandage than I expected. So I'm joining you still from Sacramento, California, this area that was and continues to be the tribal land of the Nissan and Miwok peoples. And I am sitting amongst the chaos of packing. We're leaving in 2 short weeks, ready to come to Upaya and very excited to see you all in person. Many of you are still emerging from Upaya winter practice period with its deliciously full banquet of sitting together, Dharma talks on the Book of Serenity, your deep personal explorations of koans, and some of you practicing together in residence. So you've been eating and studying and caring for your beautiful temple and grounds together. Truly wonderful. So as Kodo mentioned, recently I've been sitting with this relationship between Buddha and Mara. How Buddha and Mara continually come to life in our practice. So I decided to take a step back to the history of Buddhism, to the story of Shakyamuni Buddha, maybe a return to basic Buddhism. And I love this story. It's actually one that I return to again and again, because it's also my story and it's also your story. So I thought it would be fun to explore it together. So a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, which is also, of course, right here and right now, in the kingdom of Kapilavastu, after many, many years of waiting, King Siddhartha and Queen Mahamaya, sorry, I just realized I didn't put my glasses on, much better, were waiting to have a baby. And they were thrilled to find out that there was indeed a baby coming soon. And when the child was born, they named the young prince Siddhartha, and they invited a Brahmin seer to make predictions about the prince's future. The seer told the king, there are signs that the boy could become either a Chakravartin king, a ruler in the entire world, or there's an equal chance that he'll become a fully enlightened Buddha. So the king was desperate for his son to become a king after him, to inherit the kingdom. And he decided to turn his palace into the happiest place on earth. The prince was entertained in the palace with tutors for his education, friends to play with, and as he grew older, a retinue of beautiful women, dancers, singers, musicians, who day and night used their charm to please him. And the king's directive was that no one was to show any unhappiness around Siddhartha. And we all know how well that worked out. Prince Siddhartha became curious about the wider world, as we all do when we're teenagers. He talked his charioteer into taking him out of the palace, going out around midnight 4 different times. The first time he saw a sick person. He had to ask his charioteer, what is that? Why is this person looking that way? He'd never seen one before. And so on the second night with an old person. And finally, the startling, shocking sight of a corpse. And then he went out, or as he was coming back in, he saw a monk near the palace gates, sitting in meditation, looking completely at peace, serene, bizarrely happy in the midst of this sickness, old age, and death. The prince returned to his bedchambers very, very troubled. This huge question in his heart. So determined to understand the nature of this sickness, old age, and death, the prince left the palace in the middle of the night to answer his deep koan, which is, of course, all of our koan, this great koan of birth and death. For the next 6 years, Siddhartha lived and practiced an aesthetic lifestyle, studying and meditating under various religious teachers of his time. He lived naked in heat and cold. He beat up his body. He starved himself and deprived himself of anything that might be considered luxury. He spent years in isolation, not talking to a soul. He tried and tried and tried even harder to gain control over his suffering and to be liberated from it. Yet whatever he tried, however he tried, Siddhartha could not find what he was looking for. One day, he finally realized that this fight to completely control and subdue his body-mind was not freeing him from suffering, and definitely not creating an unshakable ground of genuine happiness. And suddenly, he had that image pop into his mind, that monk he'd seen by the gate when he'd snuck out as a disobedient teen. That monk sitting peaceful, joyous, at ease, right in the middle of life's violence and death and sickness and aging. So Siddhartha left his current teacher, he left his friends, and he gave off his practice of denying himself food. In fact, he then broke his whole practice of going without by accepting an offering of milk from a young girl. And then he walked to the small village of what we now call Bodh Gaya. There he seated himself beneath the Bodhi tree and vowed not to stop meditating until he had attained complete awakening. So Siddhartha alternated sitting and walking for 7 days, just as you all recently completed in Sesshin. And as dusk fell, Mara, the chief of all the demons, saw that Siddhartha was coming close to enlightenment, and he was determined to prevent it. So he set out to disrupt Siddhartha's meditation. How? Mara flung at him every possible version of desire, lust, anger, hatred, jealousy, fear, desire, seduction, and doubt. First, Mara manifested hosts of terrifying demons to attack Siddhartha through fear, some of them throwing spears, some of them firing arrows, some of them hurling huge boulders and even whole mountains at him, some trying to burn him with fire. And without giving in to fear, without grasping on to these apparitions as real, the weapons, the rocks, even the mountains appeared to Siddhartha as a whole rain, soft rain, warm rain of fragrant flowers. And the raging fires became like offerings of rainbow light. Then Mara sent whirlwinds and earthquakes. But Siddhartha sat firm and cross-legged beneath the tree, feeling them like a gentle rocking. So then, seeing that Siddhartha could not be frightened into abandoning his meditation, Mara appeared next as Kama, or lust. He brought with him his 3 lovely daughters, desire, fulfillment, and regret. Beautifully clothed, perfumed with lovely fragrances, they did seductive dances and called out to him invitingly. But to Siddhartha, they were as the sound of the wind in the trees. So when this failed to distract Siddhartha, next Mara became duty, calling out, "Oh, young man, the events of this world require your attention. You are a prince to follow in the duties of your father. You are supposed to be a father, ruler, and husband. Soon your own father will pass and you will be king. It's not proper for a king to renounce the world that he rules. It's time to abandon this quest for liberation from the material world." The Buddha met even this with the meditation of deep, steady awareness and an open, loving heart. Then finally came the final great challenge, self-doubt. Who do you think you are to assume the seat of a Buddha, to assume the capacity for an awakened heart and mind? It is I, Mara, who have a right to that throne of awakening. Look, I have legions to vouch for me. Who do you have to vouch for you? At that point, Shakyamuni reached out and touched the earth. He placed his hand on the living earth, and he called the earth to witness. And the earth goddess arose and said, "This is my child who sits unmovable. This is Shakyamuni, my beloved son, who through his 500 incarnations has so given himself that there is no more I. This is Tathagata, a Buddha who is going and is coming. This is Shunyata. Form is emptiness, emptiness form. This is heaven, the world of non-duality. This is nirvana, the extinction of fear and the arising of unshakable, genuine happiness." At that moment, Mara freaked out and fled, realizing that he had lost. And the Buddha experienced Bodhi, awakening. He saw that life is suffused with suffering, that there is a cause for this suffering, and that there is a potential in every human being to be liberated from this existential suffering. There's a path for this liberation for suffering. And he said, wonderful, oh, wonderful. I and all living beings from the very beginning are Buddha nature. It's simply because of our upside down views that we don't recognize it. And that was the end of his life, his first part of his life story before he began to teach. And like I said, I really love this story. Every time I revisit it, I find a new facet and a greater depth. In it are really all the core teachings of Buddhism, and there's the archetypal path that arises in our own personal lived practice. One thing interesting to me about the story of Mara is the implication that Mara is increasing the intensity of his attack each time he tries to prevent Siddhartha's enlightenment. You notice each time he ups the ante, first simply with rocks, then like with guns, then like machine guns, and then bombs, and then finally he sees nothing has worked so far. So he's like, I'm going to pull out the big one, the nuclear bomb. What is it? It's judgmental self-doubt. Deep, deep self-doubt. That deep core sense, question of unworthiness. Who are you to think you can do this? So maybe we could say Buddha was attacked by his own deepest self-critical, self-judgment doubt. Do I really have an inherent right to be here sitting on this place, on this earth? Who am I really? And it was that moment when Siddhartha fully met with awareness and compassion, that deepest self-doubt, that his identity fundamentally shifted, opened into his full Buddha potential nature that had been there from the very beginning. He touched the earth, calling the goddess, which is the whole living interconnected web of life, the divine feminine, to bear witness to his own true nature, what Suzuki Roshi's dear friend Trungpa Rinpoche would call our own basic goodness. I don't know, I think about it sometimes. Maybe in that moment, Siddhartha needed a glimpse of this larger truth, a confirmation of his true belonging. And the earth goddess responded. And they say there was thunder in the heavens, lightning in the skies, and so forth. And he was fully awakened, done with identifying with the ego self, but able to rest in his fullness, his wholeness, his interconnectedness, and his compassionate love that so deeply flowed forth. But maybe also something else. As I was reading over the last days, I came across a reportedly much older version of this earth witnessing story, where the Buddha touches the earth and cries out, "You are my mother and father. You are my liberation. From beginningless past to endless future, you and I are one." So this is already Dogen's practice realization. In our own body, every moment, nothing to do or get. Always were Buddha, always will be Buddha. So Mara's army is just as active today as it was in the Buddha's time. Which means if we want to experience this seatedness in our own true nature, maybe we need to explore to understand who is Mara and how and where and when do we meet him. Historically, Mara appears in the sutras many times most prominently in the very early Mahayana Lalita Vistara Sutra. His name could be translated as death or destruction. And early Buddhist translators into English called Mara the devil, the evil one, the tempter, and so forth. Sometimes I just think of him as the troublemaker. In the sutras, he is the demon king. He manifests with his army of inner and outer demons. These demons are also known as the kleshas. And a klesha is a Sanskrit word meaning that which upsets or disturbs the mind. So anything that disrupts our natural peace of heart, peace of mind. The root three kleshas are the poisons of ignorance, craving, and hatred. So Mara's army demons, and even himself, appear as the emotions, the states of mind that disturb our deepest natural peace. The ones like anxiety and fear, anger and jealousy, maybe an overwhelming desire, or maybe he appears as a depression, a self-doubt, or shame. It's a very long list. In one of the early suttas, the Buddha says to Mara, your first demon squadron is sense desires. Your second is called boredom. Then hunger and thirst compose the third, and craving is the fourth in rank. The fifth is sloth and torpor, while fear lines up as the sixth. Doubt is seventh. The eighth is malice paired with stubbornness. Gain, honor, and renown, besides, an ill-won notoriety. Praise self, denigrating others. These are all your squadrons, O Mara. So we get a sense of the experience, the insight of the Buddha into how Mara might appear. So Mara is all these manifestations of ego clinging, or clinging to the self as an unchanging, permanent thing. I mean, I hope we all know, that we need a functioning ego. What we don't need is to be clinging to it as the center of our world. So in Mara, there's such a powerful, dynamic representation of these experiences that both arise on and off the cushion, that carry us away from our true selves. They feel so strong, so real, we believe in them. We believe in these arisings so deeply that they take hold of us and they jump into the driver's seat. They're attempting to cope with our unpredictable world that's so constantly changing in flux. So how about your meetings with Mara? Mara was seen as a demon. The attacks on Buddha's meditation were considered literally demonic. In modern language, I've been thinking perhaps we could say that Mara is Buddha's shadow. Probably most of you are familiar with this term, this idea of shadow. It's widely used in psychology now, and it was introduced by Dr. Carl Jung. It was actually his concept, his construct, and it arose for him after he actually had encountered and studied some Buddhism. So whether we call them mental defilements or poisons or demons or shadow, these are all simply labels for your experience, for our experience of something rising up to disturb us, rising up out of this unseen world. And again, Mara's demon army really is just as real to us today as it was to the Buddha in a very personal way. We all have shadow and places that are shadowy, that feel powerful and scary and locked in the basement. This unseen, these disowned parts of ourselves. And what they all have in common is that they're hidden parts of our being that are living deep in what we might call our unconscious, for lack of a better word. And when we touch in on them, often they feel out of control, disruptive, wild, unsettling, unpredictable, and even terrifying. So we all know that we all will have our own visits from Mara throughout our lives, throughout our practice. And we can begin to recognize these visits that come in the form of difficult emotions like anger and fear, in the form of the destructive, challenging, maybe unsupportive stories we tell ourselves. Every time we tell ourselves we're not good enough, or we're doomed to unhappiness, or we're a spiritual embarrassment, or whatever judgments we pass on ourselves, these can be seen as a visit from Mara. Even a simple distraction in meditation. You know, Mara could even come into your life as busyness, the most prevalent modern form of spiritual disruption. Oh, I'll get to my cushion after I complete my to-do list. However, I think we all know by now that we're going to die with our to-do list incomplete. So this way of talking about Mara might seem like a very modern day psychological languaging. But in fact, Mara visits many monks and nuns in the early sutras with this cadre of weapons of destructive emotions. And he's literally calling them out in this familiar way, trying to distract them or interrupt their spiritual practice. And honestly, as I was reading the sutras over these last few days, I was surprised to find this same languaging. You know, Mara would literally come to the practitioners as loneliness, or berating them for being not good enough meditators, or he would come as restlessness, or the whispering in their ear, that feeling that they might as well give up. And sometimes he would come to them as they were sitting in their mountain huts as a longing for a relationship, or for a powerful position in the world, or even for wealth. So I realized truly we have a lot in common with the practitioners of Buddha's time, even in our day. This ongoing flow of our humanity, of our human hearts, our human minds, endless, beginningless. So while Mara visits these monks and nuns in their places of practice, most of Mara's appearances are actually still with the Buddha, usually when the Buddha is alone and vulnerable, frequently when he is in meditation. But Mara also appears when the Buddha is surrounded by disciples whom he is instructing, or when Buddha is addressing a large gathering, when he's on his alms rounds, or even when he's preparing to go to sleep. Even, in fact, as he was nearing his death, Mara appeared. So the sutras make it clear that Mara can strike at any time or day of night, even after awakening. Awakening doesn't vanquish Mara forever. And maybe Buddha needs Mara in order to be Buddha. Thich Nhat Hanh said, Mara is not very pleasant, but if you know how to help Mara, to transform Mara, Mara will become Buddha. If you don't know how to take care of the Buddha, Buddha will become Mara. Buddha and Mara, they need each other. It's thanks to the difficulties, thanks to the temptation, that the Buddha has overcome his suffering and his ignorance and become a fully enlightened being. Maybe we can even say ultimately no separation between Buddha and Mara. So many different stories, different characters, but in all of them, Buddha arises. And this helps Buddha and all of us to go deeper into our practice, to see more clearly into our own true nature, our Buddha nature, the ground of our being. So how do we work with Mara? How do we work with shadow in its many forms and energies? How can we engage shadow in our practice in a way that honors and accepts and integrates, understanding Buddha, Mara, one being? And how can we do this with actually creating an ongoing, maybe we could say, healthy relationship with our shadow? And as Thich Nhat Hanh said, transform our shadowy bits to become whole, to meet our original face, which is perhaps the most important task of our human life. And of course, transformation occurs through our awareness, through our presence, not through doing anything specifically all the time. Foundationally, we could say that under the Bodhi tree, all the Buddha's shadow aspects arose up in an inner attack. And sitting steadily in Zazen, Siddhartha was able to welcome Mara, to meet this attack of the most core, painful, destructive emotions without grasping on, without pushing them away. In fact, this is the essential Zazen practice that he has passed on to us for meeting Mara. We meet Mara as we sit, deeply rooted, grounded, with an unconditional friendliness, maintaining our awareness on our breath while staying vividly present. And from Buddha's Touching the Earth, we learn a great deal about this intuitive wisdom of our own earth goddess bodies, a power that lies in non-resistance, the ability to rest our being on our breath, to be attentive without being tense, to maintain our loving, open bodhisattva heart, no matter what experiences arise in our bodies. If we can do this on the cushion, we can more easily extend our service and our warm hearts to serve the world. When talking about Mara, Thich Nhat Hanh suggests that when Mara attacks, if we're struggling, we turn towards Mara. And in the suttas, often Buddha would simply say, I see you, Mara. I see you, Mara. And Mara would vanish. Buddha would meet Mara with this unconditional friendliness and acceptance. Sounds simple, but sometimes it's very challenging. I remembered the story of the mother who told her child, when you're walking through the graveyard at nighttime and you see a boogeyman, just run at it, not away from it, just run at it and it will go away. Well, the child replied, but what if the boogeyman's mother has told it to do the same thing? You know, boogeymen have mothers too. So I think this is what it feels like. It can help us to turn towards, to meet, lean into strong, painful emotions and disturbing experiences with loving kindness. And maybe even the simple phrase to ourselves like, I see your suffering. I care. I'm here for you. And then we can recognize and greet these Maras as long lost parts of ourselves. In fact, then the demons can turn into the daemons, the protectors, like the demon Dharma protectors that guard the temple gates throughout Asia. So the true life of our Zen practice is sitting quietly in the midst of disturbing experiences without being disturbed. Sometimes I think of it I feel it, I experience it as sitting in the fires of the klesha, letting go of control, sitting in the midst of a disturbing emotion, an aching knee, a flood of ruminating. This is not a feel-good practice. It's a feel everything practice, awake and alive. As it's so important to understand that to be free from suffering is not to be free from feeling. Buddha taught that every experience automatically arises with this feeling, whether good, bad, or neutral. And I don't know about you, but I want to feel the grief of ecocide. I want to feel outraged at social and racial injustice. I want to feel the love that permeates the quiet morning hours of Zazen together. Feeling is part of our aliveness, not free from good and bad feelings, not trying to outrun or shut down Mara as he comes to us, but to sit full-heartedly, our whole bodies touching the earth, unafraid, deeply anchoring our breath in the root of our body, free to experience each feeling, each sensation, each thought, letting them move on as they will, naturally. Everything manifesting, practice, realization, each moment. Radically returning to the breath, the infinitely spacious present moment. In fact, we know that all thoughts, all sensations, all feelings will arise, linger for a moment, keep us company, and then dissolve. We couldn't even stop them from doing that if we wanted. So no feeling is good. No feeling is bad. Our troubles begin when we get lost in them, when we're attached to them, grasping onto them, pushing them away. That creates the problem. So we return to our practice over and over, as did the Buddha. And it sounds again like his realization transformed everything from that point on. And I think we sometimes have this idea. We talk about practice realization, including everything. And yet we think there will be this moment where we're suddenly on permanent vacation or something. I don't know what your image is, but I don't even know if we really know. It's some fantasy often. But there really is no quick fix to our lives, no final over and done of our practice. We're continually meeting Mara, sitting with Mara, dancing with Mara. Even after awakening, Buddha needs to face Mara in order to be Mara, to be Buddha. And not just once as an episode like in the heroic drama of enlightenment. But again, remember, it's as long as the Buddha lives. Like day and night, there's Buddha, Mara. And we, Buddha Mara, we are one body. Do what we cannot separate ourselves. We are entangled with the seen and the unseen world. This is our Zazen. Settling yourself on yourself, anchoring your breath in the very root of your body, your belly, your hara, deeply, fully. And we recall our love for the world, our unselfish motivation and our intention to serve this very, very troubled world. And we sit Zazen, big, open-hearted Zazen, each breath fresh, completely brand new. Then from there, we naturally open out, holding steady, spacious awareness for all the feelings, sensations, experiences that arise. Present with them, feeling them vividly, intensely. Again, not pushing them away, not holding on. An intimate awareness of whatever arises in the felt sensations of being a body. A capacity to be present in the body with its feeling, sensation, nature, lovingly witnessing it, without pushing away even the most intense discomfort, without grasping on to the most seductive pleasure, without going off into mental stories, In this way, we learn to dance with Mara, to allow the energy of emotions and feelings to go where it needs to go without interfering. When Maureen Stewart Roshi was diagnosed with cancer, she told us, pain and joy, samsara and nirvana are not separate. Delusion and enlightenment are not separate. Life and death, health and illness, all are one. The true face of this universe includes all things in our practice, all of it. So if pain comes, we let it come and we let it be our teacher. If weariness comes, it comes. And we understand that if we don't allow ourselves to dance with Mara, if we try to barricade our hearts, body, mind, we can't really taste then the essence of our practice. We wall ourselves into a sense of isolated, separate self, our hearts unable to sing with the truth of how we're intimately intertangled with every single living thing and the world we all live in. Sitting still, body and mind not separate, dynamically aware, sensing with our entire body, receptive, alert, awake, open, so we can hear what the silence has to whisper to us. When Mara comes, we let him in, we dance with him, we say goodbye. We're letting ourselves be the vehicle for whatever teaching may come our way, not forcing or grabbing at anything. We truly open our hearts to all the blows of life that we've experienced, past, present, and future, to all our own personal Maras as part of the darkness that includes the light. Then this vibrant wellspring of life force, life living through us, far beyond our capacity to devise, control it. This is you as Buddha, calling the earth to witness throughout all the days of your lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amie. That was beautiful. And the words, I don't think you used these words, but the words karmic accelerator came to mind when you were talking about, Mara arising. And Roshi Joan often talks about during these threshold experiences, these rites of passage, like taking Jukai, like preparing for ordination, that these are kinds of karmic accelerators, like the Buddha on his enlightenment, when Mara likes to show up and challenge this transition. And can you do it? So whatever's arising here, I loved everything you said and taking it as practice. And Mara Buddha Mara, I like with the dash. That's great. I'll take that with me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sensei, for your talk. We'll end with the 4 Bodhisattva vows, and next time we'll be seeing you soon.
Yes.